Can people hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yep, excellent. Welcome to our, sorry about that, our second webinar today for Gold. It's very good of you to have all joined us this afternoon. My name is Jo Hunter, and I am what's called a portfolio manager, and I work in Pearson's test prep team. So my most recent product was Gold, and my role is to research and develop new test preparation courses from idea to publication. And we did this with Gold over the last couple of years, publishing last year and earlier this year as well. So thanks very much for joining us. Before we get going today, just a little bit of housekeeping. So to let you know that today's session will be recorded, and that in the next couple of days you will receive an email with a link to the recording. You will also receive a certificate of attendance as well. And what I'd ask you to do actually is I will ask you to participate from time to time using the chat box. And at the end of the session, we'll have some time for some questions, just generally around the session and the course itself. So I hope everybody's ready. I'll get going. Hello from Ukraine again. Thanks for joining us. Just a little bit of housekeeping about recording the session and saving your questions until I prompt you for questions as well. Okay then. So today is a webinar as part of our 6 steps to exam success. And we're going to be looking at how Gold helps with these steps. So let's move on. So over the course of the last few months, there have been various webinars that have taken place around the 6 steps to success. The first step is around knowing the exam, understanding what the nuts and bolts of the exam are. Step 2 has been around balancing your teaching, taking a more holistic approach to teaching, rather than just focusing on the exam the whole time, making sure that your students are getting a little bit of everything to help keep them motivated. Monitoring progress, how you can do this. We were given some advice in step 3. Step 4, giving feedback, as we know, essential for your students, helping them to make progress, doing this in the moment, or doing this on written work, formative testing, that kind of thing. And step 5, how to motivate your students. This is the holy grail, I think. And finally, step 6, how to enjoy your course. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about Gold. Gold is a young adult course at 4 levels: B1 preliminary, B1 pre-first, B2 first, and C1 Gold. And we think, and I think a lot of people think, that using a course book is a really good framework to help your students, guide them through the exam preparation process. So first of all, to find out a little bit more about yourselves. So who are you? Where are you from? What kind of teaching context are you in? So if you could just type in your chat box, let me know what kind of institution you teach in. It'd be good to know who we've got in the group. Okay, university, that's good. Hey, Latvia. University, okay. We didn't have many university teachers in our earlier group, so this is quite different. Hi, Maria. Language School, Albania University, so we've got EAP, Grammar School, great. Okay, this is quite a diverse group, very different from our group this morning, which is great. Okay, all right then, I'll move on. The second question that I want to find out from you is a little bit more about your students. So can you tell me again with the chat box? Okay, thanks, Helen in Moscow. So we've got an international language school there. So my second question for you is, what age are your students? If you can just type in the chat box for me. Okay, so we've got, again, good mix, some older young adults, if you like, late teens. Okay, so we're largely talking about the sort of older teens, young adults, which is great. And some under 11 from Mexico there. Right, okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, everybody. It's really good to get a good idea of who I'm talking to. So we're talking today about choosing the right course and using the right course as a helping hand in helping you progress through your test preparation. We've very recently published 2 courses in particular. The first one is Gold Experience, which we won't be talking about today, but we do have a separate webinar on that, which you'll be able to see online. Gold Experience is very much a teenage course. It's 8 levels. It goes from A1 up to C1, and it covers the main exam levels, A2, B1, B2, and C1, and also the levels in between, so the bridging levels that go in between the main Cambridge exams. And the age group, quite different. So an A1 might start as early as age 11 and go right on up through high school. Gold, on the other hand, is very much a young adult course. It's for teenagers, older teenagers, and young adults. So it's very much a secondary, upper secondary, private language school, young adult market. And this is very much differentiated in the design and obviously the text topics and all of the choices around design and the feel of the books. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is how we use Gold in the course of these 6 steps. So how Gold will help you with each of these 6 steps, and we'll go through these one by one. So the first step is helping you to understand the exam. Understanding the exam is obviously essential. It's impossible to teach somebody about the nuts and bolts of the exam if you don't have a clear idea yourself. It's also really difficult to take an exam if you haven't got an idea about what you're going to face. So it's really important for everybody to have a very good general knowledge about the exam. And that can be at quite a high level around what the expectations are, around the different papers. And it can be very much in a very detailed way as well about what's being tested and which strategies you can use in order to help you prepare for the exam. So at Pearson, we have a very solid team of authors. Our authors are Cambridge exam item writers. They write for the tests themselves. And many of our authors have worked across many of our projects as well. They're a very experienced team. We also, through the process, involve what we call exam consultants. And the exam consultant is the fresh pair of exam eyes, checking that the authoring of the material, that the content meets the specifications of the exam. So we've got the authors writing and we've got the exam consultants checking. And all of these people are involved with the Cambridge exams. So they're absolute experts. And last but not least are our own in-house team of content developers. All of our teams are working across exam test preparation products on a regular basis. They're very familiar with the exams. So it's a very tight-knit and comprehensive range of expertise that we use to create these materials. So how does Gold help you understand the exam? First of all, it provides you with the information that you need. So in the course book, we have a two-page spread that covers the high-level information about the exam, whether that's B1 preliminary, B2 first, or C1 advanced. So you get all of this information at the beginning of the book. We also include this information actually in quite a detailed way on the MyEnglishLab component. I'll talk in a bit more detail about that as we move through. The MyEnglishLab includes an exam practice, an exam section, which includes lots of videos. So you're not just reading the information, but you're hearing it and seeing people talk about the exam at the same time. So a little bit more information about the MyEnglishLab. We've got several videos here. We've got videos about the whole exam. We've got videos which cover each skill, each paper as a kind of overview. And we've also got specific videos about each part. So we drill down so that you've got information at every level. And the videos show you how, gives you examples of each part of each paper and talks you through what the expectations are and how to do it. As well as the MyEnglishLab, we've also got various other exam elements within the course book that provide you with information. We've got the exam focus, which is a section at the back of the course book. This exam focus section is linked to throughout the units and gives you either a first time insight into the paper, or it gives you a refresh and a reminder as you move through the book. We've also got a writing reference, which gives very comprehensive information around the written paper. And I'll talk again in more detail about that as we move through. As far as exam practice is concerned, as you would expect, there's lots of exam practice through the book as well. So it's very much a part of every course book section, every unit. There's a part of each paper in every unit, and that's identified as an exam task and also with a link to the exam focus in the back of the book. So it's really clear when you're doing something that's related to the exam. There are also, there's the exam maximizer, the print workbook. This corresponds to the course book. So in Unit 1, when you do the various different parts of each paper, you do the corresponding ones in the exam maximizer as well, so you can recycle and revise at home. We've got photocopiable activities, some of which are exam related, some which are not. We've got the MyEnglishLab as well, which is the online version of the print workbook, the exam maximizer. So it has all of the same activities that you would see in print, but as interactive. And it also includes quite an extensive extra element of exam practice, which includes 3 practice tests, as well as other practice activities and speaking test videos and that kind of thing. It's a really comprehensive exam resource. And we've also got the assessment package as well, which has a mixture of language and skills-based assessment, a lot of which is exam-style tasks. So whilst it might be revising and recycling language or elements from the kind of general English thread of the book, it's being done in an exam-style practice. Okay, not forgetting you. We've also got extensive information to help you with your teaching in the teacher's notes. Our teacher's notes are available as a print teacher's book, but also downloadable on the Pearson English portal, where all of our online resources are. So it gives you little hints and tips on how to teach the different parts of each paper, to try and make things a little bit more motivating, or extend the context out to a discussion, for example. So working around topics and themes, as well as looking at the exam tasks themselves. Okay, aside from understanding and being able to teach the exam, it's also useful to be able to assess where your students are. One of the examples we've got of how we help you assess your students in gold is through the writing reference. It's really important for students to have a very clear idea of of how they do something well. So our writing reference includes checklists for the different task types, the different writing genres, which show them what they need to do and how they can achieve it, giving them some really clear questions that they can look at and check against their writing to see whether or not they've actually done that when they've completed their written work. And of course, that checklist is for them, but it serves as a checklist for you as well, to help them identify areas that they need to improve. Okay, it would be unfair not to mention the exam board themselves. One particular resource which is invaluable when it comes to preparing your students is the handbook for the exam on the exam board website. And here you'll find, again, lots of background about the different types of tasks, and also things like mark schemes that show you the grading of the different papers, the different marks for speaking and writing, and various other resources. And obviously they have those for all of the exams. Okay, moving on from talking specifically about exam preparation. It's important to understand what your students' goals are. And I don't doubt that in your classes, you have a mixture of students, some of which are going to take the exam at the end of the course of study, and some that won't. So by understanding your students' goals, you'll get an idea of how you can, which parts of the material or components that you want to use, which bits that you won't use or will give to people separately, and that kind of thing. So I'll just go back and ask the question, actually. Just a quick type in your chat box. Can you give me some examples of student goals? Just a couple of minutes. Certification, yeah, absolutely. A couple more people typing. I'll just wait for a couple more answers to come through. Pass the exams, yeah. So we've got quite an exam-focused group here. Fluency, yeah. Yeah, so there are obviously a broad range of goals. Excuse me. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. That's really useful. That's great. Thanks very much, everyone. Okay, so as you've mentioned to me already, there'll be some students who want to pass the exam who are after that certificate to unlock whichever door it is that they want to unlock by using that certificate. So it's important to understand which exam that they're looking to pass. Are they preparing for other exams outside of English, for example? What other needs do they have around English? I can imagine that with the people that we've got on the webinar today, your university students, they've got some probably quite career aspirational goals as well, and want to use English perhaps for migration, career, social reasons as well. Okay. So it's really important to find out at the beginning of your course what their own individual goals are and which of those goals are shared by the group, and whether these are language or skills needs. Okay, so obviously in a lot of courses and in Gold, we've got lots of different types of material that could be used depending on the profile of your class. So we've got our main lessons, we've got our speaking test videos, for example. We've got reviews, grammar reference, exam focus and writing reference, as well as our other components. And so, for example, in some of your classes where you've got a really strong exam group, your classes will probably be quite exam focused. And you might be using things like speaking test videos in class, using the exam focus on a regular basis, really using that writing reference and making sure that students know exactly where it is and how it can be used. And also probably using a component like the MyEnglishLab, which I imagine in a university or a private language school context is really useful because it's automated. Instant feedback, and it's something that they can do as and when much more easily than carrying around their print workbook. On the other hand, if you've got a more kind of general English class where perhaps only a handful of your students are doing the exam at the end of the course, then you might spend much more time doing the main lessons and much more time doing the discussion activities and some of the more personalised and general activities, in contrast with the first class. You'll probably also be using a lot of the photocopyable materials, which are very much around building general English competence, around building fluency and communication skills. So there's something in there depending on the profile of the class that you have. Okay, so I think I've already talked through much of this actually on the previous slide, but I'll just go into a little bit more about the use of assessment depending on the type of profile of your class. So our assessment package is very comprehensive. And it includes a range of language assessment as well as skills or exam assessment. We have our unit by unit tests, which are very much language focused and really have a broad appeal. They're very much for everybody to ensure that they've picked up what you've been teaching in class. Our progress tests are a little bit more exam focused, although they are skills based. So whilst they're using exam task types, they're a benefit to everybody because they're picking up the language, again, that's been covered in earlier units and feel like skills tests as much as they feel like exam focused tests as well. Okay. So giving feedback. Often a very challenging part of teaching. It's difficult to do it in the moment when you've got a big class. it's difficult to find the time and opportunity to be able to give individualized feedback as well. So we're going to be looking at some of the ways that Gold can help you in this respect. First of all, quick question to you all. Looking at the list of activities, which kind of activities don't need individual teacher input, in your opinion? Just a quick question. If you want to write in your chat box. I'll just give you a couple of minutes if anybody's got a response. Quite a heads down activity. Thank you, Bernadette. Maybe listening. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, both of you, for those responses. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we ease the burden of feedback in Gold. First of all, with the MyEnglishLab component, and this is because the feedback is automated and it's given instantly. So as I mentioned before, this is the homework component. It's an online homework component, the print component, the exam maximizer. And you've got two options. Students can go away and carry out any activity that they wish. And once they click submit, the activity will be marked. And you, as the teacher, will be able to see in your version the score of that student on that particular activity. You also have the option in the gradebook as well. Because you've created a class, you can see how the class profile looks as well. So the beauty of this is that you don't necessarily have the difficulty of having to go through feedback in class and going through and marking. What you can do is have a look before class, see who's done it and see who hasn't for a start, and then see how far people have understood what they've been doing. And from there, you can pick out both individual areas for improvement that you can give feedback on in class, or any group areas that perhaps the group seems to be struggling with a particular area. And that shows you in the gradebook at a glance. So again, as I mentioned, you've got the ability to be able to identify any kind of further remediation that students might need. Although those who are doing really, really well and might want something to extend their learning. If they, seem to be getting everything right all of the time, then it's obviously too easy. So it has both of those benefits. And you can, as I said, you can either let them go away and do the activities themselves, or you yourself as the teacher can assign that homework to them. And this, by assigning it, it helps you control what they have access to and what they do, so that perhaps sometimes you don't want them to get too ahead of the class, for example. Okay, the alternative, which a lot of people still do, and I did when I was teaching, was taking the books in to mark, which often means picking up a stack of books and putting them in the boot of your car and taking them home, and not really looking forward to doing that all weekend. So it is a possibility. It's quite laborious. There are other ways to do this that will help you, many of which I'm sure you do already. First of all is passing the responsibility to your students, and you can do this in lots of ways. If you're setting small amounts of homework, then of course you can give students the answer key, ask students to mark themselves and feed back to you on what they've done well and what they need to improve, or get them to buy the the actual exam maximizer with the answer key so they can just do it themselves. You can do this at the beginning of the next class, as we often do. They can do this individually or swap books with a partner, or do this in groups as well. And if you pair stronger and weaker students, quite often you can help them resolve any of the issues they've had amongst themselves as a way of helping them improve and dealing with that feedback. And then you'll be able to identify those individuals or who are in need of any sort of remediation or the extension that we mentioned before. Okay, that's the duplicate slide. Right, so obviously one of the most important things about giving feedback is that you're giving feedback in relation to something. It's probably slightly unfair if you're giving sort of general feedback without the student themselves really understanding what that feedback is against. So it's really important to make sure that students understand what the expectations are, what it is that they needed to include, and why and how. So by giving them those criteria, you're automatically setting them up for success. And it means that when you're giving that feedback, you can do it against the criteria that you actually established at the beginning. One of the ways that we do that in Gold is through our writing reference and also in the main coursebook units as well. In the coursebook units for our writing, for example, we have, when we set students up with a task, we give them the elements that they need to include, so that they know what constitutes a good answer. We do the same in the writing reference as well. So each of the different writing genres include a checklist of what they need to include to achieve a good answer. And they also include a new writing task with a good model with annotated features, which shows students the elements that they need to include in order to do the same. And it means what they can do is when they've written their example themselves, they can check this against the model so that they've made sure that they've included all of the correct features. One of the good things about this kind of approach is that it means that you can start setting up different ways of giving feedback. So rather than the students relying on you to give their written homework and you to provide the feedback, you can start to set them up so that they're able to start providing that feedback themselves. One of the better ways to do this is to, again, start with your own feedback and get students to look at the approach, look at the criteria, and look at the feedback that you've given. And it's always really important to make sure that the feedback isn't extremely lengthy, because obviously, and the same for all of us, if you've got 20 things to improve, you're never going to improve any of them. If you've selected 2 or 3 key areas, then you've got a much more tangible area to try and improve on. And it's important for students to understand that. You can set them up in pairs or in groups, and using the criteria that you have set, you can get them to swap answers and start evaluating and giving feedback on their partners or their group's writing. And this takes the pressure off a little bit. And it's always much easier to give feedback on somebody else's response than on the one that you've done yourself. Eventually, that would lead on to them being able to self-correct and self-assess a little bit better. But it's often more comfortable if it starts with the teacher, moves on to the group, and then moves on to the individual. But all of this is building their awareness about what they need to include, what makes good answers, and also what makes really good feedback, because you're more inclined to respond to feedback if you've received good feedback yourself. So it's quite a good approach. The other thing around this as well is trying to get students to set their own goals. quite often students do understand what some of their strengths and weaknesses are, and it's important to have those conversations. There's little point in trying to remedy every problem that everyone's got. It's really good if they can actually identify their own problems and help them work on their own individual problems as well, and take some responsibility for that as well. Okay, just moving on for a second. One moment. Okay, so the next slide is about giving active feedback, feedback in the moment when you're doing spoken activities. It's a really good opportunity. If you've got the kind of class who are happy to speak, or you've got this kind of environment, it's really important to try and use this and give people feedback in that moment when it's just happened and it's fresh in their memory, and they might then be able to do something about it. Some possible categories might be fluency, accuracy, hesitation, extending range of language. These are the kind of things that a lot of exams, spoken exams, are marked around. Let's move on to the next slide. So a few of the things that you might like to try with your students. I think also because we've got a group of you who have got university, young adult students, I'm not sure what levels these would be at, but if you've got some slightly higher level students, a lot of these activities are quite useful. So for fluency, trying to get your students to stop worrying about the mistakes they made. This is a tricky business, but playing games that ask people to talk for a minute, or give any kind of lengthy response where nobody's going to interrupt them, is a really good way to start helping them just speak without the worrying of the accuracy. As well as the fluency, we've then got the accuracy. So picking one language area at a time, and giving students a topic to talk about. You can have little cards, for example, with topics in the language area, and students just trying to have a go and personalise and use that language in the topic, and their partner can buzz in when they hear an error, and they can try and correct it. We've also got some activities around hesitation. And what a student can do is similarly as well, finding a topic that they feel comfortable talking about, and jot down a few ideas of possible phrases they want to use, and some possible hesitation phrases that will help them when they're trying to find the time, trying to find the words, and help buy them time. So having these kind of useful hesitation phrases is a great thing. I'm probably using quite a lot of them now, actually. The other element we've got here as well is extending the range of language. And this can be done through games focusing on paraphrasing. It can be done by using your mobile phone to record, and students can do playback and find phrases that they've used, interesting phrases, and try to paraphrase them, or pick out elements that they think they could say a different way. It's quite fun to use a mobile phone, not least because people generally don't feel that comfortable about doing it. But once you do it a couple of times, it really sort of breaks down the barrier, and I think students really actually quite enjoy it in the end. Okay, moving on. Other types of feedback. So these are some activities that you can get students to do to help them focus on the areas that they need to improve. So we could have a look at some of the errors that they do in their writing, and they could create their own keyword transformations or gap fills. That can be quite an enjoyable activity with the right group. Another thing that's quite good at all levels is setting up a shared document, whether that's Google or whatever. And doing some collective writing online. And students can correct themselves as they go. But this kind of collaborative writing is quite a nice experience. And especially if it's your group against another group and you're really trying to create the best response, it can work really well. Also with the use of English, you can give students a completed task and ask them to recreate the original task by taking words out. That works quite nicely, so that they're really understanding what the task itself is asking them to do. And by creating their own, then they're just thinking a little bit more broadly about the language. And also with the listening and reading, again, picking up some of that paraphrasing, which is so relevant to many of the listening and reading exams. Asking students to have a look at an audio script or a reading text and work on some paraphrasing of the key information. Okay, moving on to monitoring progress. We've talked about how this can be done in the MyEnglishLab, but it's really important to do this over the length of the course. And most importantly, it's really relevant to know what point you're starting from. So you're sort of generally monitoring progress towards the exam, and that can come in lots of different formats. It could be done, as I'm sure many of you do, giving students a practice test at the beginning of the year to see where their strengths and weaknesses lie. It could be by doing a placement or a diagnostic test, which is largely language focused, for example. But the important thing is to keep monitoring throughout the year. And that doesn't just have to be via testing. It can be just doing by looking and listening and sort of being very interactive with your group so that you get a feel for how they're doing. So some of the ways that you could actually record this information is by creating a document like this, for example. And I'm sure you've all seen something similar to this. This looks quite formalized, but actually the formal and the informal records of progress, I think, are just as important. You quite often get an idea about how people are progressing through the noises that people make in class when they're doing an activity. And I think those are the sort of sounds that you shouldn't ignore. And I think that very often tells you how students are feeling about tackling particular papers or are feeling about a particular language point. I know that, there are certain parts of a B2 first exam which students always find difficult, and every time you set them you can see the colour drain from people's faces. So it's all of these things, as well as the formalised assessing, that's important to take into account and act upon. So as I said, one of the quite a useful and user-friendly way of doing this is through the MyEnglishLab. This isn't just to monitor progress of language and activities that they do throughout the course, but there are also mock tests and practice tests in there, which students can complete at a time that you want them to complete them. And this will give you an overview as to how far they're progressing towards the exam. And you can do them, you can do a mock test, at the end of a first term, for example, and a practice test shortly before taking the exam, just to perhaps just give them confidence that they can actually do it. So there are lots of mechanisms within the MyEnglishLab and material that can help you do the different types of assessment and monitoring progress throughout the year. This, as well as the assessment package. And I think it's important to mention that assessment packages generally are not just summative tests, that the score at the end of the test isn't just the only important, it's not the only important thing, but the information that any test gives can be used formatively and just provide you with information and a next step on what can be revised or extended. And I think this goes for any type of test, really. One of the important things about the Gold test package is that we have dyslexia-friendly tests. So these tests are covering the same language and skills as the other tests, but they've had a few little adjustments that make them more user-friendly. This could be a change of font, a slight reduction in text length, or it could be using a different task type, one which is more suitable to a dyslexic learner. Another thing to mention about the sort of dyslexia angle as well is that we do record all of our coursebook and exam maximizer texts so that any students having difficulties processing and reading the texts can also listen at the same time. Okay, so this is exactly what the test package consists of. So we've got a diagnostic test at the beginning, which includes all of the language from the book, and we've got a quick version and a full version. So this can obviously be used formatively to help you identify where your students are currently in their sort of language proficiency, and also show you how to pace your course. Know what you need to go into more detail on, and know which bits you can just revise and refresh and move on quickly, which is really important. It's really important to be picking and choosing what's most relevant for your students, rather than spending equal time on everything, which is just not possible. We've got the unit tests, which I've mentioned, are all language-based, revising grammar and vocab from the units. And we have dyslexia versions for all of these tests. Our progress tests are skills-based, and they are exam-style tasks. And we have our exit test, which is language and skills, again, exam-style. And not forgetting the teachers, we've got a little introduction to the assessment package with answer key, audio scripts, and mark schemes. Okay. Perhaps the trickiest question, motivating your students. So research shows, and I think we all know, that your students are motivated when they know where they are going and what they need to do to achieve that. When they've got material that is interesting and relevant, and things that they're able to personalise and use in a way that suits them. Language is not a means to an end, it's a way for them to express themselves and be able to do it in the way that they want to do it. So that's really important to remember. And perhaps sometimes why test preparation gets a bit of a bad reputation. So this is what Gold and Gold Experience are really trying to help teachers deal with. So it's important that your students have clear goals. In our teacher's book, we have clear aims for the start of each lesson so that you can share these with your students and let them know what it is they're going to be doing and understand their expectations, the expectations for that particular lesson. It's also important as well, aside from our sort of lesson-specific goals, that they have longer goals, longer term goals, what they want to achieve across the unit, what they want to achieve over the course of a month. And obviously, this is very course specific, very much depends how long your course is, how you do this. But whilst the class goal might be to pass the B2 first, the individual themselves might have other goals that are either beyond the B2 first or beforehand that they really want to be able to get to grips with, whether it's some learning that they're doing in their own schooling, something that they're doing outside, something that they're doing online, an application that they want to do. So understanding what these goals are as well will help you get that little inroad into what it is that motivates that student to be doing your course. So aside from the clear goals, it's also really important to have engaging content. And all of our reading and listening texts, they're very much in the here and now. It's choosing this kind of engaging content is very, very much at the heart of our early content development process. So helping authors pick the right texts, find the right sources, choose the right angles, so that it isn't something that's been done before, that it is something that's modern and relevant to our students today. Aside from the sort of more general appeal, it's also really important that the exam content is varied and engaging. And we do this in Gold by making sure that there's lots of different multimedia available. So we've got 2 speaking test videos per level, and we've got lots of authentic listening to keep students motivated along the way. A very big part of Gold is around communication and personalisation. All of our skills lessons combine lots of opportunities for students to talk more widely on the subject, whether that's the broad theme of the lesson or a particular angle on a text. So there's lots of discussion, lots of debate, and lots of personalisation built in and around each lesson, and also helping them to find the right topic to use the language that they're being taught as well. So the final step here is to enjoy the course. I'm not sure we all necessarily feel like jumping up and down on a bouncy castle like these youngsters here, but that's the aim. The whole point of using a course like Gold, it's supposed to be enjoyable for the teacher and it's supposed to be enjoyable for the students. So what we found in our research, and we find this every time we go and do research for a new edition or a new course, and that's that the ways we can make it enjoyable for you is to make the material easy to use and adapt, and also make sure that you can find extra materials when you need them without any difficulty, that we give you a variety of activity and pace that will suit different profiles of class and ensure that your students are engaged. So final thing today, I'm just going to run you through some of the levels and the components so that you know what's available, and also give a little bit more context to the conversation we've had today. So just a little recap. Gold is available at 4 levels. B1 preliminary, this new edition is all focused on the new B1 preliminary exam specification for 2020. So it's been completely revised. We've got B1 plus pre-first, which is our bridging level between preliminary and first. It's very much graded, a graded introduction to B2 first. We've got B2 first, which is which we were told on our previous edition that what we needed to do was to make sure that students really feel like they're hitting the exam level from the minute they open the book. So we've very much made sure that from the very beginning of the book, it's not a graded introduction. It's showing students what the level of the exam is and what the expectations will be. And this is also true for C1 Advanced. Okay, so some of the student components. We've talked about the course book and the print exam maximizer. We've also got the student e-text, which is the digital version of the course book. The digital version of the exam maximizer is the MyEnglishLab component. We also have the Pearson English practice app, which includes all the audio and video for the course, as well as audio and video scripts. And we've also got the Pearson English portal, which is where students can find the resources as well, audio and video resources. For teachers, you've got your print teacher's book, but we've also got the teacher's book downloadable lesson plans on the Pearson English portal, where teachers can find the teacher's notes, photocopyables, audio, video, also the worksheets that we've created for the speaking test videos that show students, introduce students to the format of the exam and how they can get those really good marks. We've also got coursebook audio on the CD, and we've got the Active Teach, which is your front of class presentation. I've just mentioned about the teachers portal, so that's the teachers book resources, notes and photocopyables, audio and video, the assessment package, and all of the audio and video scripts. I've also mentioned the MyEnglishLab, which I won't go into any more detail on. And I think I will ask if anybody in the last couple of minutes has got any questions that they would like to ask. We've just got a couple of minutes left. A couple of people have had to leave. So please type in any questions that you've got. If we don't have a chance to answer them today, then I can answer them afterwards. So if anyone's got any questions, just type in the chat box. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody. It's been great to talk you through Gold and the 6 steps today, and good luck with all your exam preparation. Thanks very much, everybody. Again, if you've got any questions, let us know. Glad it was informative. Thanks very much. Excellent. A pleasure. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for your participation. Thanks, everyone. Okay, good luck, everybody, and have a good evening. Thanks very much. Bye.